Hi, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kelly Smith, and I serve as a program analyst with Military Community Support Programs. And, I feel like every time I start these live events, I say that I'm super excited, but I really am super excited because today we are kicking off our series, Relationship Real Talk. And we will be meeting here every Thursday for the next couple of weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to have Relationship Real Talk. Uh, this series that we're focusing on right now will be talking about the 4 things you should stop doing right now in your relationship. This could possibly be sabotaging your relationship. But before we dive into that, I would love to welcome my co-host, Dr. Kelly Blasko. Hi, Dr. Kelly Blasko. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Kelly Smith. I am so happy to be here as well. I just wanted to kind of give you a background about
Yeah,
myself. So I
yeah.
am a psychologist, and I do primarily couples therapy here at Joint Base Lewis McChord in the clinics here, and work with military families, military couples. And I'm very fortunate to have worked with couples at many stages in their relationship, like maybe they just got married, or maybe 3 or 4 years, or even 17 to 20 years. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about some of the things that I do, as well as have learned in working with military couples.
It's an honor to have you here, and I am thankful that you agreed to do this series with us. Now, to kick off our discussion today, we're going to talk about solvable versus perpetual problems. And, those of you watching may be wondering, well, what the heck? What is that? What does that mean? Dr. Blasko, share with us a little bit about the training you've had to address solvable and perpetual problems.
Yes, so I work from the perspective called the Gottman Method. I've had level 1 and level 2 training, and in those trainings, I've learned ways that couples can better communicate. But the first, and Dr. John Gottman, actually, he is one of the leading experts in this area. He has had about 4 decades of research in couples communication. He even has observed over 3,000 couples in kind of a lab. They actually call it the Love Lab, to see how do couples resolve conflicts, how do they communicate with each other. And then based on all that data and research, he has been able, with his wife, Dr. Julie Gottman, to put together this Gottman method that can be really helpful in improving communication.
So I'm pausing here because I'm trying to think of the question I want to ask you. But just to be straightforward, Dr. Blasko, what is the difference between perpetual and solvable problems?
So I think a lot of us in relationships feel like we keep coming into the same problem. We're talking about the same things all the time. We're arguing about the same things all the time. We're stressed about the same things all the time. So it's actually called a perpetual problem. There's things about a relationship or elements of a relationship that are going to come up over and over again. And they may be able to be solved at that particular moment, but the same issue may come up later. So examples of that are differences in neatness and messiness. Maybe one of the partners is always neat and wants the house to be a certain way, and the other one is less concerned about neatness. I think I fall in that category. So how do you navigate that? Another area that is like that is parenting. Many different parenting styles. Maybe someone's more lenient than the other, or the good cop, bad cop, and that can create some tensions. One that I see quite frequently is around finances. because different spouses or partners have different practices for finances or thoughts or values about it, and that can cause some tension. But some solvable problems are maybe things that come up in a situation that there is a definite solution to it, and after it's solved, it kind of goes, just keep moving forward. But these perpetual ones, just as the word perpetual means, is that just keep coming up kind of over and over. But not to worry, there are ways to cope with that and to improve communication around these different perpetual problems.
So listening to you, I got to thinking about my own marriage, my own relationship, and my partner and I have different perspectives on our parenting approaches, specifically around discipline. And this is something that comes up every day, often, and I feel like we're in this constant cycle. So if I'm hearing you correctly, I would categorize this as a perpetual problem. Any recommendations on how to handle perpetual problems for any of our spouses or people that are watching? How do you handle those perpetual problems?
So Kelly, that's a really good example, and I appreciate you sharing that, because it can feel overwhelming every time you run it. Like, didn't we just talk about this?
Yes, yes.
But you have actually done the first step, is to really realize that this is something that's coming up all the time, and not to be so hard on yourself or both of you. Just recognize, okay, we've talked about this before, and we can talk about it again, but it's not something necessarily wrong with our relationship. So, and you're going to resolve it each time for that specific time. So there are ways to do that. So I don't think, one thing I really encourage couples not to feel discouraged because things keep coming up. But I'm hoping in this series, in the next sessions, I'll be able to give you some more tools around communication. But one other thing that I think is really common, I don't know, Kelly, when these come up, what happens in your body? Do you get stressed or anxious each time,
gosh.
or?
So I'm going to have to be transparent here. So when I know something has come up and we're going to have a conversation about how he handled, the parenting situation or how I handled it, I feel myself getting worked up. I am rehearsing what I'm going to say in my head. And then when we actually get to it, to have the conversation, I'm literally having to sit on my hands with my mouth zipped to not interrupt, to not say, but you, or to correct. And so that's what I feel myself doing. I feel myself getting worked up before I'm even there in the space to have the conversation.
And that is very typical. So what we call that is flooding. And many of us, we're all familiar with kind of the fight and flight response. So when you're in danger in some way, normally, that you get, everything gets heightened. Your feelings, you're ready to protect yourself. But when this is happening in daily, we're not in any kind of fight or flight situation. But because this is coming up again, it can really elevate our sensitivity. We can get really anxious or stressed. And what's really important about that is to notice what's happening in your body, as well as how you're interacting with your partner. So one thing you said, Kelly, that is really important to know is you might notice it's a perpetual problem when you start interrupting or feeling like you want to interrupt or talk over the person, or your heart rate's going up, or you find yourself clenching your hands or whatever. That those are, or you feel like you've not being heard. So that's pretty common for flooding. And what I always recommend to couples when they get in that situation is to, they can take a time out at that point. when we're in that state, we're not necessarily hearing what the other person is saying. And the problem might even shift to something that it didn't even start with. So you can just say, okay, let's take a break for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, and come back and talk about it. But the trick is, in those 5 minutes, don't start rehearsing what you're going to say the next time. Just go and take a break and then come back. And you'll find that that can be just exactly what is needed to kind of get back on course.
You know, it's I see somebody put a comment in the chat that it's hard to not interrupt. And, you know, something that my partner and I do, like I feel myself getting worked up before it happens, but then while we're in it, like I try to be quiet. And if it gets too much, then I'll say, you know, let's take a break. Let's have this conversation later, like you said. But I'm that person that's back there rehearsing, thinking of what I'm going to say, trying to remember what the next thing that I didn't get to say the first time. And then it's like starting the cycle all over again, which can be very, very frustrating. But I do think, like you said, it's very important that you take that break when you need to, and kind of just sit with it for a second and really kind of like ground yourself to kind of be present in the moment. You know, something else you said, Dr. Blasko, is that sometimes if you feel that you're not being heard constantly, that's that flooding coming up all over again. And it just is reminding me of things that's happening or that has happened in my marriage. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, something I know that you have mentioned before is that it's important to have a conversation, you know, with your partner, with your spouse, about what you both think is happening and what's going on and what's currently, you know, happening over and over again. If you're having that same conversation over and over again, can you speak to how that works? Because I can see myself getting ready to have a talk, but it's not really a talk. But I don't want to get so worked up with having that talk. So you know, I'm getting worked up now thinking about it. But so I want to be prepared to have the conversation, but not make it this big thing, you know, especially if it's this perpetual problem. Let's just have a conversation about it. But how can we stay within ourselves and not get flooded, not get so worked out?
Well, a couple things. And I admire you talking about this difficulty, because it is really difficult. And however, it's good to have a conversation about what might have been, is kind of the perpetual problem when you're not in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So like, okay, have a conversation like, geez, this parenting issue keeps coming up all the time. Let's just say that's our issue. And maybe we can work together while we're not talking about it, or in the midst of having to make a decision, that we just sort of talk about that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was, you both don't have to be flooded to stop the conversation. So perhaps one person, like say your partner, is just going on with the conversation. It doesn't seem like it's affecting them at all, but you're, you know, feeling flooded inside. It's really important to be able to say, hey, I need to take a break. And that's part of that conversation, is to agree with your partner that if that happens, okay, that it's okay to take a time out, whoever it is, either together, but you have to respect that about each other, that you know what you need at the time you need it. So that's how I've helped couples, and it seems to work. I know it takes some practice, but it really is a helpful way to kind of interrupt the cycle, so to speak.
Yeah, you make a good point, Dr. Blasko, that it does take practice and it requires you to be intentional. And it's not something that you just get overnight. It requires work. And I commend those folks that are watching, that have joined us, that will be going back to watch this live stream, to hear about how to improve your relationship, things that you should stop doing to make your relationship better. And I am looking forward to next week's discussion about defensiveness. You know, you mentioned that you are trained in the Gottman technique, And over the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And that, if you find yourself being defensive often, if you find yourself criticizing, stonewalling, contempt, that's what we're going to be talking about. And each week we're going to focus on each of those different areas and how to get out of that cycle. So we are hoping that you will join us here next week, same time, same place. But before we wrap things up, Dr. Blasko, any last things you'd want to share with our viewers today?
Really 2 things. First, I just really want to honor that being a couple is really difficult, and also being in the military as a couple can be really difficult. And but the reason I wanted to share about the perpetual problems is just that not to be so hard on yourself. It takes a lot of work, but with that work comes a lot of good and can bring you closer to your spouse or partner. And then the other thing I wanted to say to build on what Kelly was just speaking about is that the 4 horsemen, based on Dr. John Gottman's research, are 4 predictors for divorce. So what's nice about his work is that he has identified that based on tons of data, but then also has ways to overcome each of those 4 things in your communication and conflicts. So I'm really excited to share that so that your relationships can be healthy and strong and a really enjoyable part of your life. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'll be here next week.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blasko. And again, we will see you here next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about the first thing that you should stop doing that could possibly sabotage your relationship. Again, thank you guys. Have a great day.
Take care.